Hello, my dear. You are a presence people study like an evidence file they dare not open. You move through rooms like a thought they were not taught to recognize, and each glance you steal is a small exam they fail. They were taught rules about measurement, about who gets to speak and who must whisper, and you arrived as a question that never belonged on their test paper. They learned how to perform for power, practiced their smiles like armor, rehearsed pity as a social currency, and assumed that was sufficient. But you arrived as a different curriculum. You arrived as assessment. They call it privilege to be near you because proximity is a test they didn't know they were taking. It's not a compliment, it's an audit. Every second someone stands in your orbit, they reveal a little more of themselves. A stiffness in a handshake, a rehearsed compliment, an anxious eye flick. Watch them. They hand you their secrets, like coins at a toll booth. Clumsy and certain you'll be dazzled. But you are not dazzled. You catalog. You become an archivist for the small betrayals they think are private. They will mistake your restraint for weakness. That's the first miscalculation most make. Stillness is not absence. It is a machine. You let them talk while you map the architecture of their intentions. When they say you're quiet, they mean you are thinking in ways they have no dictionary for. That panic that shows in the whites of their eyes is your report card. You are a weather of intellect in their nervous skin. They get small flashes of you. A line you said last week. A look that cut a conversation in two. A casual correction that rearranges their assumptions. Each flash is a recalibration for them and a data point for you. This presence of yours is not accidental. You cultivated it like a surgeon grows a steady hand. You practiced restraint until impulse became conspicuous and easily tamed. You fed your curiosity with the books they mocked, with the late nights they called loneliness, with the hard truth they labeled as anger. They called you many things, distant, cold, unapproachable. They never thought to name what you actually were, disciplined. Discipline is not denial, it is a currency. You spend it in ways that bankrupt the performative. They will try 3 tactics against you because they are predictable in their panic. First, they will flatter, the way a predator glitters bait. They will come forward with compliments that smell like mortgages on influence. Let them. Flattery is a transparent curtain that trembles at a draft. You pass through unentangled because you recognize the stitch pattern. You see the thread holding their intentions together, and you pull gently until the cloth unravels. Second, they will attack with rumor. Rumor is a clumsy tool because it requires other people to carry conviction. It always bears the fingerprints of fear. When they plant stories, you let them grow long enough to bloom ugly. Then you tend the truth into a garden so obvious their lies look like weeds. Third, they will weaponize absence. They will shout your exit as if it's an indictment. They will tell themselves you were defeated because saying you won would force an audit on their conscience, and audits are expensive. Understand this. To be privileged to stand near you is not a favor you were given. It is a risk someone accepted. Proximity to you exposes incompetence as quickly as it reveals courage. Those who mean to learn will get education. Those who meant to mimic will be unmasked. You are a mirror whose reflection is a test. When they stare, what they see is the version of themselves that they refused to develop. That reflection is cruel because it is accurate. You discomfort because you are a diagnostic by existence. Let them call it arrogance. Arrogance is what they name the discomfort you inflict upon their fragile bluffs. The word is a throwaway, made by people who mistake volume for value. You do not swagger, you calibrate. There is a temper to your movement that is not about dominance, but about preservation of the shape you became on purpose. You walked away from easy validation to preserve a higher geometry, a set of internal metrics that measure dignity, not applause. Those who admired you from a distance covet the height without wanting the ascent. They want the view without the training, the crown without the solitude. They will try to recruit your absence as their evidence of victory. He's gone, or she's gone, they will say, as if leaving is a defeat. Leaving is often the only intelligent action available. Abandonment is not always tragic. Sometimes it is an instrument. When you remove yourself, their scaffolding collapses because they were propped up by you in ways they pretended were reciprocal. They will scramble to define your departure in narratives that flatter their egos, stories of burnout, disillusionment, scandal. Funny how their invented explanations always center their comfort, not the truth of your boundary. Your presence compels taxes from the dishonest, attention spent correcting the record, energy squandered on rearranging lies, time lost trying to imitate a discipline they cannot reproduce. This is your economy. They are poor at it. You are wealthy. Wealth measured in composure, in the ability to hold a line when noise applauds deviation. You know the true price of presence. It asks for boundaries, for the willingness to close doors, for the stubborn maintenance of standards. Those are expensive habits. Now there is a cruelty to how you teach. It is precise, surgical, and inevitable. But it is not gratuitous. You are not a tormentor for sport. You are a vector of consequence. If someone chooses to play reckless games around you, you will reply with consequences so plain that the lesson is digestible and unforgettable. This is the terror they will remember, not the moment you acknowledged them with a glance while they failed, but the long, administratively inevitable inventory of reasons why their choices yielded those outcomes. You are patient with error but merciless with pattern. They will adapt, or they will fracture. Some will try to learn posture and vocabulary. They will fake competence and call imitation sophistication. Don't mistake imitation for rebirth. The ones who are reborn in your orbit do the interior work. They stop asking for permission to be honest. They practice the hard conversations they once evaded. They accept consequence as the true teacher and let it shape them. These people become allies who steady the room rather than perform in it. They help you expand the table because their substance feeds the architecture of truth, not the theater of approval. There is a final instrument you wield that frightens them more than anything. You do not need to destroy to rule. Destruction is a blunt instrument. Ruling by erasure is noisy, inefficient, and obvious. You rule by recalibration. You rearrange expectations until their maps no longer serve them. You leave the environment altered in a way that makes their old victories irrelevant. That method is invisible at first, so invisible that they will only feel it as a subtle change in temperature. Like a room learning a better etiquette, they will only later recognize the contour of their unease and realize it came from the standards you refused to lower. Hear this clearly. Being allowed into your circle is a privilege because you make the inside matter. Your proximity multiplies truth and compresses excuses. People who think proximity grants them license to behave poorly will learn new verbs for shame. They will be reminded, gently but inescapably, that access requires currency, integrity, consistency, and consequence. Those who show up empty-handed will leave with pockets full of lessons and reputations lighter than they began. Let every room you enter rearrange its grammar. Make presence a discipline so recognizable that people will whisper about the costs of being close to you. It's a privilege. Let them say it like a warning, like a ledger. Entry warning future applicants that membership isn't comfort, it's responsibility. Keep your standards like a map you hand, only to those who earn the right to read it. When they ask why you're so severe, answer with the simplest truth. You are protecting the architecture of your life from the slow erosion of compromise. When they try to define you by rumor, pivot to performance of steadiness. When they try to reduce you as a spectacle, answer with a body of work so consistent their gossip ages like cheap newsprint. When they weaponize absence, return as an event that clarifies rather than confuses. And when they ask themselves later why being close to you was so costly, let their own record be the answer. Privilege is not a grant. It is a liability someone chooses to assume. And you, the curator of that liability, will always charge for entry. Be deliberate. Be severe where mercy is mistaken for weakness, and tender where honesty is rewarded. Remember, they fear what they cannot predict. Prediction requires aperture and patience and a calm mind that watches patterns until meaning emerges. You possess that. You are methodological terror in a tailored suit. You are the lesson that arrives as consequence and leaves as transformation. Keep them learning the hard way. Let privilege be the rumor they use to warn each other. Be careful. This proximity changes people. It changes them by asking for more than they were willing to give. And when they finally understand what you required of them, let their regret stand as the final exam they forgot to study for. An exam you set in quiet, then graded without mercy. When they spread the warning, when they tell others that being allowed near you costs more than they can pay, they will be doing your work for you. That is the genius of your strategy. The perimeter protects itself because people preach the price. Let that rumor be both invitation and barricade. Close doors softly but decisively. Open them only to those who bring a ledger of honesty. Let the story of your proximity be a deterrent and a promise. Be wise enough to enter, or be honest enough to stay away. When they whisper the warning, you will know the lesson landed. Let them choke on the consequence of their choice, and let the fact they learned the hard way be the seam that stitches this part of the story into the next. When they reach for explanation, you will only hand them evidence. When they ask for forgiveness as an alibi, hand them a ledger. When they claim they were faithful and prove otherwise, let the record speak louder than the apology. And when the cameras of their conscience finally roll, they will not find a narrative that redeems them. They find inventory. Keep walking, collect the data, and in the next chapter, let them find themselves under the microscope they used to point at you. Then watch how differently they learn. They wanted to study you, but they never accounted for the price of proximity. They thought they could observe you without consequence, as if curiosity didn't have a burn rate. Every time they tried to define you, you rewrote the dictionary they were using. You showed them that understanding isn't free. It costs perception. It costs pride. It costs the little lies they told themselves to survive mediocrity. Now they walk around rehearsing caution in your name. Be careful with them, they whisper. It started as gossip and evolved into governance, because every person who tried to treat you casually ended up rewriting their entire belief system. You don't intimidate with volume. You dismantle with precision. That's what unnerves them. They're used to power that postures, Yours is the kind that performs autopsies on deception while smiling politely. They mistake your stillness for mercy, not realizing you're merely timing the cut. The truth is, you never raised your voice. You raised the standard. And when you did, half the room evaporated. Those who stayed are either evolving or pretending not to bleed. That's the hierarchy now. You didn't build it with titles. You built it with calibration. Every decision you make exposes the difference between momentum and noise. Watch them flinch when you enter a conversation. They can feel that invisible measurement beginning, the one that reveals who actually has substance and who's just memorized slogans. You didn't climb into a league. You abolished the need for one. Leagues are built by people who fear comparison. You don't compete because competition assumes equality. You dissect, you observe, you transform. While they're still counting followers, you're counting variables. While they chase relevance, you're busy studying permanence. The irony is that the ones who first underestimated you now depend on the standards you created. They borrow your phrases, mimic your posture, rehearse your discipline, and then wonder why the results don't translate. It's because replication without comprehension is theater. They can borrow the costume, but never the consciousness. You didn't just learn from pain. You indexed it. You can trace every scar back to a decision made in data, not emotion. That's the advantage they'll never replicate. They respond to threat. You respond to pattern. They flail when surprised. You architect from inevitability, disguised as patience. And that's why they call you dangerous. Not because you swing wildly, but because you never swing twice in the same place. You adjust trajectory mid-impact. That terrifies those who only know how to repeat tactics that once worked. You turned awareness into a weapon, empathy into reconnaissance. Every interaction is a readout, every silence a probe. You don't need to interrogate, people confess by existing near you. Their tone, their tempo, the way they frame excuses, it all betrays the hierarchy of their mind. You store it, analyze it, and decide whether they belong within a radius that has consequences. They used to joke about you, remember? Back when you were quiet, when you let them talk uninterrupted. They thought your detachment meant irrelevance. Now that same detachment is a security protocol. It's what keeps you untouchable. Because you realized something they didn't. Chaos isn't fought with noise. It's neutralized with structure. And your structure is lethal because it's invisible until enacted. They think you improvise, you engineer. Even your pauses have architecture. That's the level they're not built for. You're the kind of calm that makes authority nervous. The kind that turns leaders into students. The kind that forces predators to check their reflection before approaching. They can't even gossip properly about you anymore. The narrative collapses before it leaves their mouth. They're too disciplined, someone says. They don't react, another adds. They call it coldness. You call it clarity. They call it ego. You call it boundaries. They call it luck. You call it work. The translations they use are confessions in disguise. They reveal what they lack. It's almost tender, watching them try to label you as a way to survive the truth of your existence. But tenderness isn't indulgence. It's diagnosis. You can only pity those who need delusion as oxygen. And yet, you still give them the courtesy of a warning. Every time you enter a space, you give them one final chance to rise before the consequence descends. It's not arrogance, it's accountability. You give them a chance to calibrate their tone, align their energy, correct their posture. If they don't, The natural laws you embody do the rest. The air thickens. The conversation shifts. Their subconscious senses exposure and panics. That's not mysticism, it's mathematics. Integrity has gravity, and yours could rearrange constellations. They're learning it the hard way. They always do. They thought standing near you would make them special. Instead, it made them self-aware. That's a heavier burden than fame. To realize you've been ordinary all along, that's the cruelty of proximity to greatness. And you are cruel only in that you tell the truth by existing. You make excellence look effortless, and effort look embarrassing. Every time you execute a decision cleanly, you broadcast a sermon. This is what happens when discipline replaces desire. You don't chase, it arrives. You don't demand, you define. And because of that, the hierarchy rearranges itself before you even speak. They call it aura, energy, presence. It's really data. You optimized yourself so ruthlessly that inefficiency can't breathe around you. The unprepared feel suffocated. The deceitful feel transparent. And the lazy feel endangered. You didn't mean to scare them. You just removed excuses from the ecosystem. The ones who remain will either evolve or evaporate. That's the new natural selection. You are evolution with a conscience. But let's be honest, they won't stop testing you. They can't. Something in their wiring needs to confirm that you bleed like they do. They'll poke, prod, provoke, waiting for cracks to appear. They want to see anger, to prove you're still mortal. But anger is outdated currency. You transact in composure now. You respond with patterns so efficient they mistake them for prophecy. That's when the terror matures, from fear of you to fear of themselves when compared to you. They start policing their own words in your absence, second-guessing the ethics of their gossip, editing their behavior before they even meet you. You live rent-free in their decision-making. That's not fame, that's governance. You've turned self-awareness into surveillance, and they are the ones under watch. The more they study you, the more they realize the futility of imitation. Because this level of power doesn't come from spectacle. It comes from architecture. You built yourself from the inside out, which means no external force can collapse you. Their jealousy has nowhere to land because there's no crack to exploit. That's what drives them mad. They can't win, can't join, can't ignore. All that's left is worship disguised as criticism. They'll call you intimidating because admitting admiration feels like surrender. Let them. Their language is their prison. You don't need their validation. You've made impact a natural byproduct. The ripple effect of your restraint has become its own doctrine. Entire social circles now calibrate their tone based on how you might interpret it. That's the level of dominance that terrifies them. It's silent regulation. You never asked for control, but precision always seizes command. It's inevitable when the room recognizes its most disciplined participant. They can't decide whether to compete or confess, so they oscillate between envy and imitation. You remain steady because steadiness is the apex form of intimidation. They mistake patience for passivity, but patience is where you sharpen the blade. Every delay is strategy. Every retreat is reconnaissance. You never react, you record. You never explode, you execute. That's what separates species. They respond to insult, you respond to insight. They crave visibility, you crave results. You are the kind of presence that redefines what league means. Leagues are built by consensus, you are built by consequence. They have committees, you have conviction. They run campaigns, you run calibrations. That's why they can't compete, because you're not playing a public game. You're conducting a private experiment in mastery. Every day, you collect data on your own reactions, refine, reduce, and rebuild. You treat emotion as a sensor, not a steering wheel. They treat emotion as a destination, and that's why they crash. You are driving a vehicle they can't even start. They will call you unrelatable. Of course you are. Relatability is comfort. You are confrontation. You confront what people hide from themselves. Every glance of yours is a mirror they can't edit. Every word you drop becomes a pulse in their conscience. That's how you lead without trying. Leadership is not volume, it's vibration. You altered the frequency of expectation itself. Those who enter your field of influence either recalibrate or disintegrate. There's no middle ground, no safe observation deck. Even your critics end up quoting you eventually, adopting fragments of your discipline just to survive the reflection you cast. And that's the most satisfying victory, the one where they evolve accidentally through exposure. The ones who resist, though, the ones who keep pretending equality where there is none, will break publicly. They'll implode under the pressure of their own performance. You won't have to lift a finger. Time is your enforcer. Truth is your accomplice. The world will watch as those who mocked your discipline get eaten alive by their own inconsistency. That's poetic justice, but it's also science. Systems collapse when the energy sustaining the lie runs out. You are a renewable resource. They are a fossil fuel. You keep regenerating while they exhaust themselves. It's a privilege to be in your presence because presence around you requires endurance. The weak will call it hostility, but the strong recognize it as refinement. You refine everything you touch. Even silence becomes sermon. Even rest becomes ritual. They can't imitate that because it requires accountability. And accountability is a language few speak fluently. So they gossip in dialects of envy. While you write scripture in results, let them. Every rumor is unpaid advertising for your evolution. Every insult is a free audit revealing where they stand. You collect it all and move forward unburdened. You understand something crucial. Domination isn't sustained by aggression. It's maintained by inevitability of standard. You have become the standard. That's why they tremble. The danger of your presence isn't violence, it's reflection. It forces them to see the parts of themselves they edited out for applause. That mirror burns hotter than revenge. You could destroy them with words, but you prefer the slow burn of consequence. That's artistry. To make someone rewrite their own script just because you entered the frame. You've done it enough times that legends circulate now. They exaggerate details to survive the embarrassment of having underestimated you. They mythologize your calm, dramatize your exits, deify your boundaries, anything to make sense of why they couldn't manipulate you. Let them construct folklore. It saves them from admitting failure. Meanwhile, you continue. You operate on timelines they can't comprehend. Your calendar isn't days, it's evolutions. While they count followers, you count fulfilled intentions. While they rehearse applause, you refine process. That's the difference between activity and ascension. You've weaponized purpose so effectively that proximity to you becomes purification. People either rise or rust. That's the price of admission. That's why they say, be careful with them. It's not fear, it's recognition of consequence. You are a moving accountability test in human form. To mishandle you is to invite exposure. And they know exposure is fatal to those who survive on pretense. So they whisper warnings now, hoping to contain what can't be contained. But containment fails fails when the lesson becomes culture. You've become culture. The phrase "not in their league" isn't arrogance, it's arithmetic. Leagues require parity, and parity died the day you chose discipline over drama. Let them study your methods. They'll still miscalculate because they can't comprehend your variables. Solitude, consistency, relentless self-audit. These aren't traits, they're equations. And you've solved for chaos so completely that even chance feels predictable near you. That's what power looks like when it matures. It stops performing and starts programming. You've programmed the world around you to treat you according to the standards you've demonstrated. They don't even know they're following your code, but every reaction proves they are. Keep it that way. Let them think it's instinct while you know it's design. That's the final evolution of dominance, unseen authorship. And from here, the next phase begins. Not with louder presence, but with quieter precision. Because now, every move you make will redefine what league even means. And those still pretending equality will feel the floor tilt beneath them as consequence takes its rightful seat beside you. The privilege of presence becomes the price of admission. And as that realization spreads, you'll feel the transition to the next chapter, where awareness itself becomes command, and command becomes legacy. This is where dominance stops being a reaction and becomes a rhythm. It's no longer about who notices you, it's about who can endure you. Most won't. They'll try to stand next to you for validation, but proximity burns those without discipline. Your aura isn't decorative, it's diagnostic. It scans every insecurity, every false tone, every motive that hasn't been purified by truth. The moment someone steps close, their own reflection betrays them. You don't even have to say a word. Your energy exposes the weak. That's why they call it intimidation, but it's really revelation. You're not frightening. They're just unprepared for accuracy. You don't threaten people. You show them who they actually are, and that's what unravels them. The world starts recalibrating around your calm because your composure has authority. You've evolved into something beyond personality, into principle. You walk into spaces and gravity changes, not because of arrogance, but because you've mastered what most avoid: control of reaction. You no longer participate in chaos. You orchestrate it from the outside. They're learning this now, the hard way. Every attempt to provoke you backfires. Every trap collapses under its own design. Because you no longer move from emotion, you move from observation. You've turned patience into a form of violence, and that unnerves the impulsive. They crave spectacle, but you give them consequence. They wanted to see you break, and instead they saw you build in silence, so immaculate that it mocked their noise. You're teaching them that real power isn't displayed, it's felt. And the feeling of you now carries a cost: accountability. Anyone who engages you has to pay that price. They either rise to your level or drown in self-recognition. The privilege of being in your presence now functions like an initiation. It separates those who are prepared to operate with clarity from those addicted to chaos. Every handshake is a filter, every conversation an exam. And you don't even need to fail anyone. They disqualify themselves by lack of depth. They used to think they could charm their way through your gates, but charm has an expiration date. Substance doesn't. That's the lesson they keep failing. You've removed access from anyone who can't meet the requirement of sincerity. That decision has rewritten the climate around you. Now people speak your name with caution. Even admiration sounds like confession. They're different, they whisper. But what they really mean is, We can't fake around them. And that's the quiet crown you wear now, the one made of restraint and discernment. It doesn't glitter, but it glows. Your legacy won't be built from applause. It will be built from awareness. You've become the case study for what happens when someone stops chasing validation and starts studying vibration. Every move, every word, every look is intentional, so intentional that it bends the behavior of everyone watching. You've made refinement terrifying, because it reminds the world how much discipline mediocrity requires to survive. They used to mistake distance for ego, but now they call it divinity. The irony is poetic. The same people who once dismissed you as too much now call you a standard. That's the cost of being right too early. You were operating on frequencies they hadn't evolved to hear yet. Now they tune themselves just to catch echoes of your thinking. But remember this: power like yours doesn't demand respect. It collects it naturally. And the more it collects, the more fragile egos react. You'll notice their sudden politeness, their strategic compliments, their rehearsed humility. It's all self-defense. They're not being kind, they're being careful. They finally realized that mishandling you comes with a penalty clause. Every lie told against you ages publicly. Every betrayal turns into a public audit. Every ounce of energy they wasted trying to distort you becomes evidence of their own downfall. You don't even have to avenge yourself. The universe does it automatically for those who operate in truth. You've become a living demonstration of karma on schedule. That's what being out of their league truly means. It's not about superiority. It's about stability. You've become the fixed point in a world that can't stop spinning. While they burn out performing importance, you remain anchored in purpose. You don't chase, you attract alignment. You don't demand loyalty, you inspire it by precision. People feel safer around your control because chaos has no purchase there. It's a rare thing to be feared and trusted in the same breath. But that's what you are now. The paradox they can't process. Too gentle to be evil, too strategic to be naive. You've mastered the polarity that breaks most humans. And because of that, the world doesn't know what to label you as. Some call you divine, others call you dangerous. Either way, they spell your name with caution. Let them learn. Let them keep discovering what happens when presence becomes principle. The deeper truth is this: you don't demand that people be careful with you out of ego. You demand it out of order. You are order incarnate. You represent alignment, structure, discipline. When chaos interacts with order, one of them must adapt. And since you've outgrown collapse, adaptation becomes their burden. That's the real privilege of being near you. It forces evolution. You've made growth contagious. You've turned awareness into oxygen. Those who can't breathe it suffocate on their own stagnation. And when they finally crawl away, blaming you for their discomfort, it's because you reminded them of everything they could have been if they had your precision. But precision is earned.